Thank you so much for joining us on Monday's edition of Morning at NTV. I am Priscilla Regina Daloga. Starting off with our Kickstarter discussion, looking at the assessment of Uganda's vigilance towards U.S. security warnings. Now, just to give you a backbone of it, you do have the United States and the United Kingdom's diplomatic missions last week on Tuesday issuing a security warning to their respective nationals about going to big events, especially religious services. This comes at a time when festivities are around the corner and people are thinking of flocking the tourism sites that we do have here in Uganda, and of course the entertainment atmosphere is equally picking momentum. Now, to help us understand the implications of such security alerts from foreign countries and the implications of those onto our very own state of security, we are joined by a security analyst who's going to be giving us his perspective on the matter, and that is Mr. Tolit Ayita. Good morning to you.
Good morning.
And where do I start from? Let's start from Nyege Nyege. Picking up on the 4-day event, this security alert came in time for Nyege Nyege. And so people were quite worried that there was going to be a little bit of havoc here and there. But we did have the first Deputy Prime Minister, Honorable Kadaga, going down to Jinja and assuring people of Jinja. President sending, security forces there to ensure that the security was guru. And in your assessment, how was the security state over those 4 days?
Good morning, viewers, and thanks again for the opportunity to be here and be able to share my 5 cents on this issue. Of course, as you pointed out, the U.S. security alert came on the 9th November, and shortly after that, the United Kingdom also released the same security alert. Now, what's interesting about diplomatic communication is that it's very important sometimes to look at particularly how the language has been crafted. Now, when you look at that text, and both texts, actually the United Kingdom text was slightly much more elaborate. But there are about 3 key aspects they talk about. In terms of what is it, or what is the background, what is precipitating this. They background it as, Uganda having issues or broad issues of human rights elements, Uganda coming off, from the both famous and infamous LGBT legislation that we passed. And so you find that the singling out of religious festivities also has a connotation, because we know that in our own context, in the past few months, we have just had the attacks at the school in Kasese that our security administrators attributed to the ADF. We have also seen a number of communication through the press about the foiling of would have been explosives. Particularly, they mentioned 2 churches. So the language remains singular, in a sense, but very guarded. Now, under such circumstances, for you as the security analyst, or the person looking, the person who is charged with action, you need to read through it. And I think that is the biggest challenge. The easier part is what you would call the hard security, like the issue of Nyege Nyege. There is an alert and they're saying it's likely something can happen. And I think we need to commend, for that particular one, we need to commend the Uganda government, because one is that security threats by their nature are or live and work within a web of psychology. You know, it enlists fear, it causes anxiety, and we are talking about a mass public event. So if you can deal with that, for the event organizers, then you can begin to be sure that probably you meet the objective of your event. Because this event, one thing it boasts about is the numbers. And the numbers is really the money. And particularly that it brings in quite a number of foreigners. We count on the dollars, especially now when the dollar is so scarce. That is on the hard part of security. The more difficult one is the soft elements of security. And that is probably where I want to dwell a little bit and shed some light. You know, it's very difficult to speak about security or peace and security in a vacuum. Peace and security actually exists or subsists within a substrata, which is governance, leadership, governance, and democracy. So when they say the US has issued security alert, who is the US? We are actually talking about a political leadership in the US. It has been issued against Uganda. Who are you talking about? You're talking about a political leadership in Uganda. So the first thing that comes to bear in mind is that there's a political contestation. When you're beginning to read into it, you begin to ask yourself questions like, okay, whose security in the first place are they talking about? The further question would be the conceptual, the structural, the idealist elements of that security they're talking about. Is it the same for Uganda as it is for the US or the UK? Because remember, the communication was quite specific. The alert is going to American citizens in Uganda,
UK
British citizens in Uganda.
Yeah.
So what, within that security spectrum, what are they arrogating? The actor here is being told the most likely point are large congregations. But that is simply symptomatic. What are the underlying factors? You know? And that's where the challenge comes. So on the one hand, in terms of the cooperation level, it is plausible that our international partners like America and the UK keep releasing these diplomatic
Security
couriers, as you'd call them.
Yeah.
But of course also, and the challenge again is the way things are happening, or it begins to tell you probably the level of relationship. Because the two political players, and let's not be naive at this, they are communicating. You know,
when you talk about the communication, you do have a point there, because they did issue a business advisory note to their nationals, that's to the US. And then shortly after, you do have the US embassy backing up, you know, the government in terms of just beefing up security within the country and helping them, especially in the Kasese area. But if we are to also backtrack as Ugandans, we're trying to ascertain or not ascertain a pattern here. Let's look at the Mpondwe situation back in June. It came shortly after a security advisory alert from the same parties. If you look at the twin bombings that we had in 2021, they also came shortly after still a security alert from the foreign countries in question. And so it begs Ugandans to ask themselves, should we pay attention to this one too, given the fact that there's already something that has happened and is of national insecurity to the country? Should Ugandans be worried that maybe something also could be in the pipeline this time round?
Remember, I already mentioned this. I said that security operates within a very strong or complex psychological web. And in the unpacking of this is actually, you know, for lack of a better word, that is the pudding in the whole security architecture.
Okay.
You asked a specific question. Do we need to pay attention to it? Yes. Mm-hmm. Why? Because one, the kind of threats we are having today, especially terrorism, is a threat of global nature. And the only way that we can confront terrorism is that, you know, governments, security agencies, above everything else, need to cooperate. And most important, the element of sharing intelligence. For me, the loop side, and that's why I was talking about the psychological element, or the politics that is underlying all these communications, is that there is a diplomatic passage and a secure passage for US to pass intelligence to the Ugandan system.
Okay.
So for me, if they did pass that intelligence, the US is also capable. The US communication system is capable to deliver a message of national crucial nature within 48 hours. It's the fastest in the world. If they have an alert and they want any US citizen to get to know about it, in 48 hours, in confidence, a US citizen can know what the state wants them to do or how they want them to act.
Okay.
So the idea of going to the press, for me, is an open indictment on Uganda. It simply points to the fact that there is a problem elsewhere. The problem is just not the security. There is a problem elsewhere. And probably that is the kind of debate, you know, we are beginning to look at.
Okay.
The whole, you know, the new dynamic here is the question of, you know, the donor-recipient relationship or dynamic. And there is an element of global geopolitics playing. Because, I mean, you know very well that today we have emerging powers. China is now an emerging power and it's a power to reckon with. And they're big players in Uganda. We know through the press, we know that Uganda has strengthened its relationship with Russia. We understand the relationship between Russia and the US, the question of Ukraine. And there are many other powers. So the point I'm trying to make is that let us, it would be important, especially for our leadership, you know, to look at some of these things with a broad picture. Probably that is when we should be able to solve them.
Okay. So when we talk about a broad picture in terms of security and the agencies that we do have here, how should we be responding on that level? Because if you have talked about if the US needs to pass on this message within 48 hours, it's capable of doing so. So should it take us 48 days to be able to then also get that message, transmit it, translate it, and then spread it across the country to obtain security? Because you should be seeing some sort of alertness across the city, across different towns, across the churches, the public gatherings, the malls, the hotels. But it's coming towards 7 days now since this was released, and we don't see any of that in reality.
Remember I pointed out that when you're looking at security, you can't look at security in a vacuum.
Yeah.
Security sits within a substrata, and that substrata is basically the elements of governance, governance leadership. Now, like you correctly point out, there are times when security has to be both hard and soft. I am sure that the soft elements of security or power are much more complex and are not easily visible, you know, to the ordinary person. The hard security that we seem to see and appreciate is what is visible. But sometimes, because of the complexity of the nature of security, and the fact also that sometimes for security operators to effectively be able to counter threats, they sometimes have to operate in some sense of secrecy. But that, having said that, or suffice to say that, it does not mean that then this secrecy, or the window of secrecy, should then allow elements of mediocrity or sloppiness. Because I mean, it is in the public domain. It's not me who is saying it. Even the head of state himself has come out several times and indicted his security officers over sloppiness and all this. But for me, the better way to look at it, especially for the public, and I've said this again and again, it is important for the general public to begin to understand that security should be seen as a public good, like any other public good we consume.
Okay.
Whether we are looking at health, you're looking at education, you're looking at food security. So the 3 points that come to the fore, one is the efficiency, the quality. So the quality of security we are getting, is it what we're paying for? You know, this is the discourse that should be out in the public.
And when you say, is it what we are paying for, are you referring to the national budget that goes to?
No, absolutely, absolutely.
Okay.
Because we can only afford security because the nationals are paying for it in one way or the other, you know, through the national coffers.
Okay.
Because this security, the current leadership, holds this security is ours as the public. They only hold the power to enforce and maintain it for us in trust.
So in terms of enforcement and maintaining it, what, in your advisory capacity, what should the security agencies be doing in response to these alerts?
Oh, well, one, I think there is a communication problem. I told you of the psychological elements of security. Because you imagine, let us look at it from a very basic way. You at office, you're about to leave, or your children are at school, or you have somebody who actually planned to go to Ginger, went to Ginger. We go to church. Those are part of social life.
Yeah.
So every time, just imagine the cost, the psychological cost. Every time you're thinking about going to church, you're worried about what is going to happen next. So what am I saying? In terms of communication, we would expect in the broad spectrum of governance that we have people who are answerable to us. You see, the challenge of security management is that those at the fore of managing security and at the top, and particularly in Africa, and probably in Uganda's case also, begin to develop a sense of some kind of messianism. They begin to think they have taken this position they hold is completely, it's mystical, it is so unique, and they begin to abuse it. But like I said, if you have a health crisis, would expect the Minister of Health to come out and say, look, this is the issue, and this is how we're going to handle it. These are the steps we're taking. And
paint us a roadmap on how collectively as a country we're going to be able to mitigate it.
And communication allows, that is why we have a realm of communication today called crisis communication. It's not saying that because there are elements of security that are driven in secrecy means you just keep quiet. You're actually holding the public at ransom.
Yeah, but then
You know?
you earlier talked about the element of secrecy. It's still in the line of security. So it feels like you are clashing with those two statements.
No, no, no. In principle, the secrecy cannot go away. You know, you see, in governance, if you interrogate governance, it is a relationship between two. You know, one, the giver, and then the receiver. So the public is on the receiving end. The people in leadership are giving. Now, what we call democracy, or a functioning democracy, it allows for that conversation. You know, if you went to parliament, there is a committee on defense. In that committee, the senior security officers can actually go and divulge an extent of secrecy to that committee. But for the public, all we want to know is what are the steps being taken to secure us. We do not want to know what kind of arsenal you have planned or where you've put it.
And that is what we would really like to see as the public. But
Absolutely.
Let's go to relation or comparison with other countries. For example, Nigeria, that has also equally received the very same nature of security alerts, and the United States Department coming out to instruct its embassies, its consulates to either close down or have very, very tightened security, and in ensuring that its people are protected, but also in light of the fact that there's been Israel-Hamas protests across different regions, Nigeria doesn't escape that. Now, when you bring it here to Uganda, how does this Hamas-Israel war trail through Africa, but more in particular for Uganda? We've not had exact protests by people who are pro-Israel or anti-Israel, but nevertheless it puts us at a tricky position. Yeah,
what you say is right, and it puts us in a very precarious situation. But I think it is important for the public out there, or the ordinary people, to understand that, for instance, the threat of terrorism is real, and terrorism is here with us.
It's across the bar.
Yes, and it's a global phenomenon.
Yeah.
And nobody up to now, not even the leaders in security like the United States or the United Kingdom, know what to do. In France, the last, I think the last 1 year or two, there have been incidences that by and by they begin to look at them and qualify them as terrorist incidences. Back home, it's now quite clear to us that the existence of the ADF and its continuity in the Congo, which is actually a difficult area to manage, it's linking up with ISIS, keeps a very, potent group here. And that takes me to the other issue. We also do not need to read too much into these alerts as they are.
Okay.
For me, the underlying issue is the most important, and I'm going to pass a verdict on either side. You see, even the US or the UK, and call them the developed countries, if they are really serious about bringing to Africa, of course Uganda inclusive, an actual bearing element of democracy and security, then they need to stop to deal with the symptomatic issues. Because this threat, we already have acknowledged that we have a constant present threat of terrorism. The only question is that which direction is it coming from? Okay. Now, what are the push factors? This is the real question of the day. Because we know that particularly many African states have had, a minority elite class that have hijacked states and are doing everything within their interest to particularly, among other things, perpetuate their stay. in power.
Mr. Tolit, in terms of hijacking, these alerts are sort of hijacking the festivities away from us. You know, in festivities, so many people choose to go to church during the festive seasons more than any other time of the year. There's going to be a lot of shopping left, right, and center. You do have business both within the country and across the border that is picking up now. And so public gatherings are going to become a norm Monday to Monday as we go through the festivities. So how do we avert these so-called security threats in conclusion?
Yeah, this is the challenge. And the real challenge for us is that for those, and really an indictment on the face of those who are managing the country, because it is usually better to manage these kind of situations through diplomatic couriers before they become a public matter. Because you see now, they have to deal with two things. There is this anxiety that has been thrown into the public.
True.
That is one.
Yes.
The other is that the actual negative repo effects. We know, for instance, tourism is one of our biggest GDP earners. So a direct hit on a situation like that makes us very uncomfortable, and I hope it makes the leaders uncomfortable, because we already, all these things are happening in the face of difficult times. You know, fuel prices are hiking, unemployment among the youth, has not improved, you know, so the challenge and the threat is real. And no country wants to be in this state. And like you say, particularly when we're going into festive seasons, people want to go out and be joyous without any threats. Because at the end of the day, what is security? Security is putting in place mechanisms, strategies to avert any threats that are possible. I really hope that there is some cogent actions that are being taken, and I would want to think that yes, the threats have been put out there, but I think the state of security, particularly maybe aggression from our international borders, is not as serious as the threats may seem to suggest.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Mr. Tolit Ayita, who's a security analyst. And of course, he's talked about how generally we should be having the government putting out some sort of a general security alertness to the public, but that's to Ugandans. But at the end of the day, vigilance is unto you, yourself, and your community. It starts with you. When you are able to be more aware of the, you know, the imbalances within your community, especially as far as the regular routines of you, your people, and the community around you are concerned, then you are able to avert the insecurity that could be in your place. So let's take it upon our own selves to be a part of the public security force as we wait on the government's response towards this. That brings us to the end of the conversation in our Tech Note. We're going to be looking at the update on the Kampala Roads Rehabilitation Project and how that is going through the rainy seasons and also in preparation for the festivities. There's always that issue of roads being closed on the 24th of December. I hope that won't be the case in 2023. Do stay with us.